Protected by Atoll. Now with all the latest news from around the world and here at home this Christmas, it's the news at 10.
King Charles appeals for peace and speaks out at the terrible loss of life in war. But in his second Christmas message to the world, he also praised those who care for others.
At a time of increasingly tragic conflict around the world, I pray that we can also do all in our power to protect each other.
His heartfelt sentiments were supported in their speeches by the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury. But Benjamin Netanyahu told his troops today the war with Hamas will continue to the end.
This is ITV News with Yasmin Bodalbhai.
Good evening. With the suffering and loss of life in war around the world seeming to increase every day, it is perhaps not surprising that King Charles has spoken out against what he called increasingly tragic conflict. In his Christmas message, he called for people to treat each other as they would wish to be treated and praised the selfless army of people who care for others. And as our royal editor Chris Shipp reports, an unexpected guest appeared with the royals today at Sandringham for their traditional Christmas church service.
The King and Queen led the way into the Church of St Mary Magdalene this morning, the Wales family, William, Kate, George, Charlotte and Louis, close behind. A Christmas morning service which included the Duchess of York, Fergie, at church with the royals for the first time since 1992. And after his first full year as king, a Christmas Day message that Charles III could truly call his own. Delivered from Buckingham Palace and from the room which leads onto the balcony from where the King and Queen saw thousands of people gather in May for his coronation.
Over this past year, my heart has been warmed by countless examples of the imaginative ways in which people are caring for one another. My wife and I were delighted when hundreds of representatives of that selfless army of people were able to join us in Westminster Abbey for the coronation earlier this year and emphasised the meaning of coronation itself. Above all, a call to all of us to serve one another.
And for a king who has worked for decades to promote tolerance between faiths, a moment to acknowledge this year's suffering in the land of Jesus' birth in Israel and Gaza.
At a time of increasingly tragic conflict around the world, I pray that we can also do all in our power to protect each other. The words of Jesus seem more than ever relevant. Do to others as you would have them do to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Inflation this year might have eased, but from a king who spent his birthday in November launching a project to send less food to landfill and more of it to people in need, he said hardship remained a real issue for many.
Service also lies at the heart of the Christmas story. Throughout the year, my family have witnessed how people of all ages are making a difference to their communities. This is all the more important at a time of real hardship for many. I wish you a Christmas of peace on earth and goodwill to all, today and always.
The royal family's Christmas Day traditions continue with King Charles as much as they did for the late Queen, but this year younger faces came together with some from the past on Christmas Day. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Well, religious leaders also reflected on conflict in their Christmas messages.
Dei omnipotentis, Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, descenda sobre vos.
In his Urbi et Orbi blessing, Pope Francis lamented war in the land of Jesus' birth. He prayed for world peace and called for every effort to stop the violence and help for those who are suffering. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, highlighted the suffering of children caught up in that war and also the suffering of those in Ukraine and Sudan. And in a move to distance itself from Russia, many people in Ukraine celebrated Christmas today, December the 25th, for the first time. Traditionally, they've celebrated in January, in line with the Russian Orthodox Church. Well, while religious leaders urged a ceasefire in the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu visited his troops today and told Israel the war with Hamas is not close to being over. Well, that seems clear tonight as the fighting and destruction from both sides continued throughout Christmas Day. Charlie Frost has the latest.
Landing in northern Gaza this morning, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came to see the battleground for himself and to deliver a clear message to his troops. This war is far from over. Forget anyone who talks about stopping. We don't stop, he said, adding the war would continue until Hamas are finished, no less than that. Their Prime Minister also said he knows they've left families at home in Israel and that those families support them. That's a great thing, he said. That's the key to victory. But while the families of soldiers support them, the families of the more than 100 Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas heckled Mr. Netanyahu. Now, they chanted from the gallery of Israel's parliament earlier, urging him to do a deal to bring their loved ones home immediately. But the Prime Minister simply repeated his message. Addressing them directly, he said, "We will not stop until victory." And on the ground in Gaza, they feel the weight of his words. Just as many of us had started celebrating Christmas, last night Israel unleashed what Hamas claimed was one of its deadliest airstrikes so far on a refugee camp in central Gaza. Meanwhile, calls for peace continue. Egypt today putting forward a new proposal for a ceasefire between the two sides. But the words of a defiant Benjamin Netanyahu will have dampened hopes of its success. And tonight, as footage shows rockets firing towards Israel, set off by militants from the Gaza Strip, it looks as if both sides have no intention of putting down their weapons. Charlie Frost, ITV News.
And finally, the younger royals got in on the act for Christmas Day. The Prince and Princess of Wales released this new family photo of their 3 children, Princes George and Louis and Princess Charlotte. Charlotte, smiling broadly in the middle, has an arm around each of her brothers. It was posted on social media, wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas. And that's it from all your Christmas team here. Good night.
It's a cold and wet outlook.